threats and stuff. Trust me. And then,
do you think Miller would think, hang on, just
I know it's not perfect. Always falls asleep.
Thanks very much. Do you know what my favourite room is?
Go on.
The one you lot aren't in.
Dad.
At Halifax, we can help you buy a home, but only you can make it yours. Halifax, it's a people thing.
Kathy Newman at Drive on Times Radio with Co-op Car Insurance. Park £50 in your pocket. New and existing Co-op members who buy car insurance get £50 to spend in store and will donate £5 to local community food projects. Get a quote online today. Terms and conditions apply. Co-op Car Insurance is provided by a select panel of insurers.
Well, we're just dealing with some breaking news on that affidavit explaining why the Justice Department justifying the search warrant used to raid Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago resort in Florida earlier this month. There's a few, it's coming out in dribs and drabs, basically. We'll have some reaction as soon as we can. But the warrant authorizing the search said that agents were seeking all physical documents and records constituting evidence, contraband, fruits of crime or other items illegally possessed in violation of 3 potential crimes, including a part of the Espionage Act outlawing gathering, transmitting or losing national defense information. And the warrant also cites destruction of records and concealment or mutilation of government material. So as I say, we're all going through that frantically as we can, and we'll bring you lots of reaction when we get it. But now it's time for our weekly WTF panel. Here to discuss, in fact, we're going to turn to a guest on that right now. People have been working hard looking at who can react to this. David K. Johnson is an investigative journalist and author of It's Even Worse Than You Think, What the Trump Administration is Doing to America, and he joins me on the line now. Good afternoon, David.
Good afternoon.
David, I've been sort of reading what I can online. I'm sure you've been poring over every sentence. Tell us what you make of what you've seen so far.
Well, they've only released information that explains the reasons they took this intrusive action of executing the search warrant. But what we know from the material that was not redacted is that Donald Trump was in possession of information about either spies or foreign assets, that is, someone working or cooperating with the U.S. from a hostile power. There's no reason in the world he should have that kind of information, which, of course, if you wanted to sell it to a foreign power, could be worth a great deal of money, and certainly would expose people to the threat of death. There's also a reference that he held materials that are national defense materials that he has no authority to hold under any circumstances. So I think those are the two big things I've detected so far in the documentation.
I mean, that sounds pretty serious stuff in terms of Donald Trump's reputation and, of course, his potential presidential bid.
Yes, well, the other interesting thing here that goes to the reputation is that the justification for keeping much of this secret is concern about the physical safety of people who are cooperating. Now, when you're talking about a mob boss, that's understandable, but the FBI has come to the conclusion, along with the Justice Department, that the witnesses in this case could be in physical danger because they're telling about Donald Trump's behavior. That is just extraordinary. Absolutely unprecedented for a former president of the United States.
Well, I should say, obviously, Trump's allies have railed against the affidavit. So, I mean, I guess he will see this as part of the kind of persecution, as he sees it, at the hands of the Washington establishment.
Yes, well, Donald was taught by the notorious Roy Cohn, the lawyer who he called his second father, whenever law enforcement comes after you, attack law enforcement. They are illegitimate. They are the criminals. You're the innocent victim of this criminal organization, the FBI. Roy Cohn did that throughout his life, and that's what Donald has been doing here.
David K. Johnston, investigative journalist, thank you very much for joining us with that immediate reaction to that breaking news about the release of the redacted version of the affidavit justifying that search warrant used to raid Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago resort. Well, it is time now for our weekly WTF panel discussing the week's big stories. Obviously, a story breaks just as we come to that, so we'll reflect on that too. Labour peer Dame Joan Bakewell and Times columnist and former Conservative Party leader Lord William Hague are on the line. Good afternoon to you both.
Good afternoon, Kathy.
Afternoon, Cathy.
William, if I may, just a very brief reaction to that breaking news on the search warrant there. I hope you were listening into that analysis, but I'd like to get your reaction if I could.
Yeah,
I suppose.
Sorry, if I could just get a reaction from William, Joan, just for a second.
It's very good that the affidavit has been released because here we can see in more detail what is going on and the illegality of which Donald Trump may well be guilty. Well, we can't pronounce on that from a distance, but what this appears to be about is taking away and keeping highly classified information. And as someone who served in government and had access to a lot of highly classified information, it is just unimaginable. You know, that is material which, if it is found by somebody else, is a danger to the lives of agents that might be working for your own country, that can give priceless information to a foreign or hostile power. It's an extraordinary thing to do. So it's an important test of American democracy and the legal system that Trump, despite all his popularity with his supporters and being an ex-president, could still be prosecuted for that. And he ought to be, if that is what he's done.
Joan.
These are very serious allegations indeed, and although in a way perhaps we aren't surprised because Donald Trump resorts to all sorts of defensive behaviours, it is one that strikes at the very core of the government and its secrets and its confidentiality, and that must be followed up and dealt with. I think it's very good, as William says, that it's transparent now that the American people can see what it is alleged that he has done and move on forward to that with all its implications for his possible running for the next election. So it's a good step forward, although it reveals terrible things.
Right, well, let's turn to the big news today before that story broke, and that's, of course, the energy price cap rising to over £3,500 a year on average, an 80% increase in household bills. Chancellor Nadhim Zahawi says the government must ensure help isn't just a sticking plaster.
Clearly, there's real anxiety amongst the population, both in terms of people's household energy, gas and electricity, but also businesses, especially SMEs, which I am also focusing on. We've got to do more. We need to remain resilient. We need to make sure that this isn't a sticking plaster, that for the long term we continue to help the most vulnerable who have no cushion, and that's what I'm determined to do.
William, we heard from someone earlier in the programme who lives in social housing. She's on universal credit. She has mental health problems. She needs to run an epilepsy alert to, using electricity. She's done all she can to cut back on her energy use already, and she is terrified. Is it enough for the two candidates to say, wait 10 days and we'll have a plan?
Well, I think it's right that it's a new Prime Minister who decides on this, and of course the existing energy price cap lasts until October. As long as people can be confident that they are going to get help, someone in the situation you've just described will need a lot of help, and it's very important that the new policy of a new Prime Minister gives that help to such a person. I think that is coming, and I think that will come and all be announced before a new price cap takes effect. So there is that word of comfort, if you like. But this is a monumentally serious problem. And what you have to bear in mind, if you're sitting in government dealing with this, you need to help all the people who really will need it most and who wouldn't be able to afford these energy prices. But just as the Chancellor was just saying, you have to make sure it is sustainable. This could go on for a long time. You can't spend all the available money at once. It's important not to fritter the money away on any other things. I would not have the cut in national insurance contributions that Liz Truss has proposed. I would concentrate on helping with energy prices.
Right, and does that apply to other tax cuts that she's suggesting? Prioritise the energy crisis and just postpone any tax cut plans?
Well, that is what I would favour. This is such a huge problem, and the government won't have that much room for manoeuvre in how much money it can throw at the problem. So it will need, I think it would need to concentrate on those things. And that's been part of the argument between Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss in the leadership election. And I think there is a final point to this, which is that you have to make sure that people who are better off nevertheless still have an incentive to save energy with larger houses or whatever. So you can't cushion everybody against the price increase completely.
Joan?
I think we want fewer words and more action. It's all very well saying it's coming one day. Once there's a new Prime Minister, we will do something. It won't do. Boris Johnson is a disgrace. He's absent when he should be present, making at least a statement of reassurance to the public. There are people who are desperate and desperate with worry, and somebody needs to reassure them, even if only to say, small things are happening. It won't do. It has to be seen to be active. And I think Parliament, perhaps we should recall Parliament sooner than we're due back. I think there needs to be leadership. There is an absolute absence of leadership. People want to hear from people who offer them hope and comfort and action.
To be fair, Joan, the Prime Minister has made a statement on this, but he's made a promise that, the next person will do something about it. So it is, at least there were words from the Prime Minister.
Well, there were words. That's what I'm saying. We need action. And also the words were kind of mealy-mouthed, really. I mean, we don't need to know that. We know that we're holding on for the next Prime Minister's appointment. And we're having to go through tremendous anxiety among working people who have nothing, who are feeling that they're going to have even less. I mean, there needs to be some real major move socially so that, people are signing up. I had a petition sent to me saying, don't pay, refuse to pay. There's going to be social anarchy if we don't do something that makes people feel somebody is in control and has their interests at heart.
William, do you think there is a risk of social unrest if the government doesn't get this right?
Well, I think it has to get it right. I don't want to predict social unrest because I think we know what's going to happen here, which is an enormous amount of help will be given to the people who need it most. And we've seen that as we know, Rishi Sunak as Chancellor a few months ago, within the existing energy price cap. And out a lot of policies, £15 billion in total, to give people direct help. Now, what we can be certain about is whoever is Prime Minister in a couple of weeks' time is going to be doing an awful lot more of that.
Right, and
because it is an extremely...
I've got a question from someone on Twitter, specifically for you, William. James Asbestos says, a question for Lord Hague, if I may. Does he regret changing the leadership rules? It seems to be a never-ending car crash that we do not need at the moment.
Now, that is a good question, and indeed, I would change the leadership rules back to the members of Parliament choosing the leader, because we did it on the basis that there would be a lot more members, that people wanted to join a political party where they could choose the leader, and that it was part of having a lot more members. And as it's turned out, it hasn't produced a lot more members. People don't join organisations as much as they did 20 years ago. So I think there would be a good case.
Regrets, you've got a few. More from our panel in just a moment. It is now 10 to 6. This is Packing You in a Drive on Times Radio.
Friday nights on Times Radio with Yesterday. TV for curious minds. Listen to Times Radio for all the latest global news, politics and thought-provoking views on culture, philosophy, entertainment and the arts. Exploring the stories beyond the headlines and looking ahead to all the weekend's cultural highlights. Every Friday night from 7 on Times Radio with Yesterday. TV for curious minds on Freeview Channel 27 and also available on UK TV Play.
Tonight's Euro Millions jackpot could make your dreams come true, but not the dream where you're abducted by aliens. Not the dream! No, the one where you're flying around the world on your own private jet. The Euro Millions jackpot keeps getting bigger. £84 million tonight. Euro Millions from the National Lottery. Turn app, online and in-store. Estimated jackpot. Count terms, rules and procedures apply. Players must be 18 or over.
Times Radio Drive with Kathy Newman.
We're talking WTF, the week that finished, with Dame Joan Bakewell and former Conservative Party leader Lord William Hague. Someone called Kate has texted in and said, I think aimed at Joan, actually Boris Johnson made a statement this lunchtime reminding people of the financial support already in place and will be built on. But I don't suppose it suits your anti-Johnson narrative to say so. Well, Kate, I've got to break it to you. I did say that, and I made that point to Joan. So there is no anti-Johnson narrative here. We are just reporting the facts. So now let's have the grim facts on the Liverpool shooting this week. A 36-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of murder after a 9-year-old Olivia Pratt-Corwell was fatally shot in her own home on Monday. Merseyside Police and Crime Commissioner Emily Spurrell says everyone is alive to the challenges of organised crime in the area.
I think we have to recognise that Merseyside definitely has some challenges around organised crime linked to gangs and those kind of groups that we see around county lines. We can't deny that. I think we're in a very different place to where we were a number of years ago. There has been a real proactive response from everybody across Merseyside to tackle this issue. Merseyside Police are routinely regarded as being outstanding in tackling some of these issues. So we know that we have the right approaches in place. But obviously there is still more to be done, and this is something that I think everybody here is very alive to.
Joan, how shocked are you by this whole episode?
Oh, it's absolutely terrible. It's absolutely desperate. And I'm such an admirer of Liverpool. Liverpool is a great city, and its citizens have a great sense of the identity of that city and their belonging to it. So there will be great grief right across the city, as you can hear in the voices of anyone who speaks about it. Now, I think, as I understand it, and this is taken the word of the police commissioners there, that the things have improved in recent years, that the gang wars have been handled to some extent so that there is knowledge of what is happening where young people are being recruited and groomed to deal in drugs, which is one of the causes of all this antipathy. So it's tragic that it's fallen back again, and we have to look at why young people become seduced into this world of presumably excitement or instant gratification, and what else can be done to offer them something worth living for.
And also, I mean, William, the two contenders, well, whoever becomes Prime Minister in 10 days' time, faces a rise in serious crime, violent crime, in addition to all the other many challenges. And one of the things that has not been delivered on by the current administration is that increase in police officer numbers.
Yes, that is right. I mean, they have to really follow through on that. I mean, on top of with all the other priorities that they will have to spend. It's not just about numbers and resources, although it is partly about that, but it's also about effective policing that concentrates on the hot spots and the gangs that Joan was just talking about, and that we need a more effective policy on drugs in the country in the long term, because the so-called war on drugs has not been a successful war, and some of us would like to see quite a different approach. But yes, they do have to deliver on that, because this is a rising problem at the moment in general, not necessarily in Liverpool, but it is a rising problem. It's got to be yet another of the top priorities of an incoming Prime Minister.
Different approach? I mean, how radical are you talking there, William?
Well, I've written in the Times in the past about the need for a different approach, of treating drug addiction more as a health issue than as a crime issue, in order to reduce over time the demand and misuse of drugs. Because at the moment, the involvement of criminal gangs in exploiting an ever greater dependence on drugs of more people does fuel crime, and it is part of the gangland wars. Who knows whether it's how much it's part of this particular tragic case this week.
Yeah.
We are going to need a different approach. The approach of the last 20, 30 years has not been successful.
Yeah. And just finally, before we leave a discussion of this week's news, Health Secretary Steve Barclay was forced to defend his government's record after an angry member of the public confronted him over efforts to reduce ambulance waiting times. Let's have a listen.
Are you going to do anything about the ambulances waiting and the people dying out? Well, don't you think 12 years is long enough?
Yes, and we
12 years, you've done bugger all about it.
It was quite an ambush. Joan, did you sympathise or not?
Well, I mean, what is terrible is the anger that people are feeling, the widespread sense of anger when things are not working anymore, and it spreads discontent and resentment into people's lives, and I really regret that. What we want is a community that is satisfied with the services that it gets, and which will bring up young people to find their lives satisfactory too. It's a huge ongoing problem. So, of course, I sympathise with her immediate rage. I had to wait the other day for several hours for an ambulance myself. Of course, but we understand how that has arisen, and we want it changed. And there is a great sense now that people are expecting change so that things will improve. That's quite right, and they should.
Joan, I'm sorry to hear that you had to wait for an ambulance. I hope you eventually managed to get yourself sorted out.
Yes, I am sorted out. I was sorted out in the end.
William, have you been ambushed by an angry member of the public? How have you dealt with it?
Well, it's an important part of British democracy that people can berate you in public, of course, and in many ways it's good to see that is thriving and well. Have I been ambushed? Well, I've had a lot of eggs and other things thrown at me over time. When I've been addressing meetings around, particularly when I was leader of the opposition, and heckled all over the place. I mean, too many times that I can remember.
Funniest heckle?
And of course, sorry?
What's been your funniest heckle?
Well, I can't remember. I was once heckled by a vicar at an election meeting in North Yorkshire, and you don't necessarily the clergy with getting so involved and being so rude. And I remember, I can't really remember what it was about now, but it was a rare experience being heckled by a vicar.
It's a bit like being bitten by a dead sheep.
Yeah, it is. All sorts of people get very excited. But of course, you have to, that is the job of the politician of whichever party to explain what they're doing about, it's a very serious problem, ambulance waiting times. But it's also part of the result of COVID, lockdown, all everything that we've suffered since then. Then they have to make sure they get those waiting times down. That's yet another way. Making a long list of government priorities. It's going to be a pretty terrible job being the new Prime Minister.
Yeah, it really is. Really, really daunting. Joan, you have to hand it to Steve Barclay. He was pretty unruffled by this attack, wasn't he?
Yes, he behaved exactly as you would expect. He responded to her. He had something to say. It's part of the skills of politicians, wouldn't you say, William, that they learn to listen and also to offer a quick answer and perhaps get away as quickly as possible. So I thought he did it very well.
Right, well, thank you both very much for joining us. Dame Joan Bakewell, Lord William Hague. Lots to chew over, lots we missed out, inevitably. But there's lots more to come on the programme as well, so do stay tuned because we're going to be hearing from Polar Preet Journey, and also the 17-year-old who became the youngest adventurer, the youngest aviator to fly solo around the world. So stay tuned for that.
The UK, on DAB, online and on your smart speaker. This is Times Radio. Know your times.
It's 6 o'clock. I'm Kathy Newman. This is Times Radio Drive. The headlines this evening. Average household energy bills will hit over £3,500 a year from the beginning of October after the regulator Ofgem announced a rise to its price cap today. The Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer says the next Prime Minister has no plan to combat the cost of living crisis.
We've got two leadership candidates who are fighting with each other about how appalling they've been in government, and neither has come up with any plan to deal with this problem. Unforgivable.
Merseyside police have said a man has been arrested in connection with the murder of 9-year-old Olivia Pratt-Corbell as her family pays tribute to their chatty, nosy little girl. And the US Department of Justice has released a redacted version of the affidavit justifying the FBI's search of Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago home. Coming up, we'll get the thoughts of the former head of the UK Energy Security Group on the rising energy price cap. We'll hear advice from Money Supermarket's energy expert and from the first woman of colour to ski solo to the South Pole.
This is Times Radio.
But first, the latest news with Rachel Jewell.
Thanks, Kathy. Good evening. Boris Johnson insists the government will announce extra cash next month to support households during the energy crisis. The regulator Ofgem has confirmed an 80% rise in the energy price cap, sending the average household's yearly bill to £3,549 from October.
Of course, we could see this coming, and that's why we've put the steps in place that we already have. And don't forget that although there will be more announcements next month, more cash coming from September onwards, you shouldn't forget that the pipeline of cash stretches out throughout the autumn.
Well, the Chancellor Nadhim Zahawi has also confirmed that the government is working to develop more options to support households. But the Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer says the government has to take responsibility in a situation like this.
You've got a cost of living crisis. You've got a Prime Minister who insisted on staying in office, recognises there's a problem with energy prices, shrugs his shoulders and does nothing about it. You've got two leadership candidates who are fighting with each other about how appalling they've been in government, and neither has come up with any plan to deal with this problem. Unforgivable.
Well, charities are warning of an Armageddon this winter, and consumer expert Martin Lewis from MoneySavingExpert.com has told Times Radio that without government intervention, rising energy prices mean people will die.
Frankly, to have allowed this to happen without, at the same time as they did back in May when they announced what they thought it would be and they announced the help package, is really bad politics and is bad for people. But we have to move past that, and I am now praying and pleading and begging with Liz Truss or Rishi Sunak, on the day you get into office, you need to give people firm plans and some peace of mind about this.
Some breaking news tonight, and 14 of the 15 boxes retrieved during an FBI raid on former US President Donald Trump's Florida residence contain classified records, with 25 of the documents marked top secret, according to an affidavit. The US Justice Department has released the partly restricted legal document explaining the justification for the search at the Mar-a-Lago property on the 8th of August. A 36-year-old man's been arrested on suspicion of murdering 9-year-old Olivia Pratt-Corbell in Liverpool. She was shot dead on Monday when a man chased his intended target into her home. Former Liverpool captain Steven Gerrard, now manager of Aston Villa, says it's hit the community hard.
I'm personally devastated. I've got a 10-year-old daughter myself, so I can't imagine what the family are going through right now, and I hope that family get justice as soon as possible. It's been a tough week. I don't like to read or see things about my city like that.
Authorities in Germany say 2 British boys have died after drowning in a lake near the border with Belgium. The brothers, aged 7 and 9, were reported missing by their parents at a designated swimming area in Ruhrberg. They were recovered from the water but died after being taken to hospital. Emmanuel Macron says Britain is a friendly country regardless of its leaders, sometimes in spite of its leaders. The French president has been speaking after Liz Truss, the front-runner to be the Tory leader, said the jury's out on whether President Macron was a friend or foe and that she would judge him by his deeds, not words. And Boris Johnson has spoken on the strength of the UK-French relationship.
Emmanuel Macron est un très bon buddy de notre pays. The relations between the UK and France are of huge importance. They've been very good for a long time, ever since the Napoleonic era, basically, and I think we should celebrate that.
Rose Ayling-Ellis has urged TV channels to fix their problem and subtitle every show they put on air. Delivering the alternative McTaggart lecture at the Edinburgh TV Festival, the actor and Strictly winner said her reality as a deaf person is not always nice. She says she feels frustrated and unheard when programmes she wants to watch aren't subtitles. Looking ahead to the weather tomorrow, scattered showers developing across much of England, Wales and eastern Scotland by lunchtime, with the best of the sunshine expected in western parts, patchy rain reaching the far northwest later. And our top sports story this hour, centuries from captain Ben Stokes and wicket-keeper Ben Foakes have put England's cricketers on top in the second test against South Africa. They've declared on 415 for 9 with a first innings lead of 264 runs. The South Africans are just getting underway in their second attempt with the bat at Old Trafford. And we'll have a full sports update at 30:30.
Across the UK, on DAB digital radio, on the free Times Radio app and via your smart speaker.
Kathy Newman at Drive on Times Radio with Co-op Car Insurance. Get a quote online today.
Good evening, you're listening to Kathy Newman on Times Radio. Thanks very much for listening. We'll have more in a minute on our top story on energy prices, and the US Department of Justice has released a redacted version of the affidavit justifying the FBI's search of Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago home. We'll bring you the latest on that too. Plus, in the thick of it, our regular feature about someone who's hit the headlines. 17-year-old adventurer Mac Rutherford tells me about breaking a world record, becoming the youngest person to fly solo around the world in a light aircraft, snatching the record from his older sister, who achieved exactly the same feat just a few months ago. Here he is telling me about one highlight from his trip.
So Kenya, it was a real highlight because of the national parks I was able to fly up and all of that. So just a general occurrence in that flight is I had an eagle fly literally right past my canopy to see it so close by. Definitely don't want to hit it.
Not one but two adventurers on the programme today. In the ladder, Preet Chandy, Polar Preet, the British Army medical officer and first woman of colour to ski solo to the South Pole, tells me about her life and career defying expectations.
I really wanted to go to university. I remember being told that I wasn't smart enough to get in, and actually I remember the words being said that I was too stupid.
Who said that?
A member of the family. I remember going into Derby City Centre and seeing an advert for the army, and everybody looked happy on the poster, so I thought that was a good sign.
Well, let's return to our top story this evening. Ofgem's energy price cap will be going up every 3 months instead of every 6, with a new cap coming in October of £3,459. And now that figure is expected to soar even higher next year, with speculation it could go as high as £5,000 by April. I'm joined now by Clive Muffett, who's an energy analyst and former chairman of the UK Energy Security Group, and Stephen Murray, the energy expert at Money Supermarket. Good evening to you both.
Good evening.
Stephen, let me just start with you. I wonder whether you could highlight what your fears are for the winter, because we've had warnings that people will actually die because they just won't switch the heating on.
Yeah, and I think some of those warnings are very real. We're looking at not just hikes and rises in the energy prices that we've talked about before, but just significant levels of energy spend that are for some households going to be 30, 40, 50%. There's lots of analogies being given today, but if we look at the amount of energy spend per year against the state pension, we're looking at potential energy bills a year of £5,000 against a state pension of somewhere between 8,000 and 9,000. Those figures just speak for themselves, and the fact that there are going to be so many people, and not just the poorest, but so many people that are really going to be struggling and concerned. So we've got the mental health and health issues, as well as the fact that there are going to be people who are switching their heating off when really they absolutely cannot do that over the winter.
Clive Muffett, let's talk about those figures, because you just heard some pretty stark warnings there from Stephen. The consultancy Cornwall has warned that average bills could surge to over £6,600 per year in April based on current market prices. They've been pretty spot on so far. Do you believe these forecasts, or do you think they might be over-egging it?
I think it's a bit technical, Kathy, but the point is that the Ofgem have calculated the cap on the basis of an average forward price expectation, and there's always uncertainty surrounding that. But you've got to look at the weighted average cost of the gas that actually integrated suppliers buy. And it could well be that by the time of the last quarter of this year and the first quarter of next, that price that they actually pay, the weighted average cost, could be lower than those projected prices in the cap. And the reason for that is because the vertically integrated suppliers have access to what we call equity gas, i.e. gas that they own, and they also have access to long-term gas contracts.
I mean, obviously it'll be some time before we know whether those forecasts are realised. So in the meantime, are you pretty concerned about the situation this winter? Do you agree with Stephen's analysis earlier?
Yes, I do agree with that situation. I also think it's about time that the government, if we had one, or when we do get one, actually realise that the best way of tackling welfare is not to intervene in the market by offering rebates and things, which effectively underpins the revenues of suppliers and allows them to offer rebates which eventually have to be repaid through higher energy costs and or taxation. So I think we need to separate out, and we need to be clarity. We need clarity in the next few days. That in fact, the support